Hi, this is Starkey Sowers. Welcome again to another Plus Program training series. Today's topic, protein, and this is part 2. So when we think of protein, what I want to do is, from some of you guys that maybe missed part 1, is give you a little bit of review about proteins. So looking at the chart here, a couple different things. John Jacob Berzelius was the one who actually gets credited in 1838 for the discovery of proteins. And so he actually coined the word protein from protus, which is a Greek word, which means of primary importance. And one thing we know about proteins is they're absolutely essential in the human body. And so when we think of the human body, there's a couple different areas where we see proteins. Number one, there's structural components, which is going to be muscle, as well as bone, as well as tendons, organs, all these different things, as well as also the immune system. The immune system, of course, immunoglobulins, complement factor proteins, as well also as the nervous system. The nervous system neurotransmitters are made of amino acids. And then also when we think of a couple other different systems in the body as well too, such as enzyme systems are made out of proteins as well. So one of the other things that we want to look at is how much protein do we need and where do we get protein sources? So a couple of thoughts. Number one, if you're a female, you need roughly about 50 grams a day. If you're male, it's roughly about 60 grams a day. If you're over, believe it or not, 60, the requirement goes up to about 80 grams a day. And if you're doing heavy construction work or you're working out a lot, 80 grams plus is definitely going to be a norm that you want to look at. All right. So it kind of gives you a little basis on how much. So how much or what kind of foods can we get proteins from? There's protein-rich foods that are animal sources. So looking at the animal sources, we're going to see a couple different things. Number one, we see eggs. The other thing, we see milk and milk products, whey being probably the top on the list with that. Also in that milk category, yogurts, as well as cheeses, and also as well as kefirs and things of that nature. All right. So then chicken, fish, and meats kind of round out the list. And then looking at a vegetarian sources, number one on the list is going to be legumes. Say legumes are going to, of course, be something of the nature like peanuts, kidney beans, as well as soy, as well as peas and things of that nature. So next on the list would also be nuts and seeds. Probably some of my favorites are going to be almonds, as well as pumpkin seeds, definitely being a great quality protein. And then whole grains. Whole grains, probably the most popular right now, are going to be rice as well as oats. And then finally, just a vegetable source would be potatoes as well as broccoli, rounding out that list. All right, so a lot of times people will ask, well, what's the difference between a vegetable protein and an animal protein? So one of the things that's so important is specifically amino acids. So looking at the next slide, we see that there are 20 different amino acids that actually make up proteins. Out of those 20 amino acids, 8 of them are essential. Those 8 essential amino acids, if they're not adequately in a protein, makes it what is known as an incomplete protein source. And so kind of like looking at that list a little bit, for instance, take rice, it lacks methionine amino acids, so it kind of makes it incomplete. So once again, those 8 essential amino acids have to be there, and they have to be there in the amount that the body needs to make it a complete protein. All right, so what are those 8 essential amino acids? A real quick acronym, TV till PM. We'll give you a quick understanding of what they are. So we look at it: tryptophan, valine, threonine, isoleucine, lysine, as well as leucine, and phenylalanine and methionine round out all the 8 essential amino acids, giving you just a quick list. And that TV till PM is kind of a fun acronym. All right, so remember, we've got to have those 8 essential amino acids. They've got to be in abundance to be a complete protein. All right, so what does that mean for vegetarian sources? Well, when we look at, for instance, we take indigenous systems that have lasted for years and years. They've learned how to combine incomplete proteins together to develop what we call a complete protein. So in this particular situation, I used rice and I used peas, or you can use rice and use beans. And for instance, rice typically lacks in the amino acid methionine. Peas, of course, and beans have an abundance of the amino acid methionine. At the same time, when you look at legumes, they typically are a little bit shy on the amino acid tryptophan. Well, when you look at grains, they're usually abundant in it. So what happens when we add the two together? We have what we call complementary proteins, or proteins that added together produce what we call a complete protein source. Now, at one time it used to be thought that you had to eat those particular complementary proteins at the same time with each meal throughout the day. What we have found out is that you can actually separate them out, eat them throughout the day. Just make sure that you're getting those sources. And a good reference range would roughly be about a cup of grains a day and about a half a cup, so to speak, of legumes to give you a complete protein source throughout the day. So that gives you an idea on how to take a vegetarian protein, make it a complete protein, especially if you're in a vegetarian. If you're not, using the animal sources are very easy ways to get a complete protein. All right, so some final thoughts on proteins. A couple things. Number one, you want to make sure that you're getting the amounts that you need on a daily basis. It's absolutely essential. Proteins and amino acids are essential. Without them, life doesn't exist. I'm telling you, it would be a miserable day if you didn't have proteins. All right. So the other thing, when we look at it, it's also good to maybe space proteins throughout the day. So having proteins breakfast, lunch, and dinner does a couple things: stabilizes blood sugar, helps improve memory, helps increase functionality of just what I call energy systems throughout the day. So that becomes a critical component. If you're going to be an individual that eats meat proteins, make sure that you trim the fat off and try to get the lean cuts. And if you're doing the vegetarian sources, make sure you're doing the complementary together. And that'll just definitely make your protein quality the best you can have. This is Starkey Sowers. Thanks again for watching another Plus Program training series.